Hello, Mike. Hello, Chris.
Hi there. How's it going?
Welcome to the closing night of Mimesis Documentary Festival 2023. My name's Eric Coombs Ismail. I'm the director of the Center for Documentary and Ethnographic Media at CU Boulder, and that's where the festival is hosted. And we're just so thrilled to have you here and so grateful for your work. And I think everyone give them a nice round of applause, please. So I find myself, hello, Mary.
Hi.
So nice to see you. Mary Helena Clark, everybody. Maybe one more round of applause is in order. Mary Helena, my name is Eric, and I'm moderating this Q&A, and you'll have to forgive me. This is the first time I've seen both of these works, and I'm still kind of reeling from the experience, and so forgive my ramblings, and maybe we can find something, a thread here that will lead to some more generative questions from the audience. But before that, I should probably tell you, Mike and Mary Helena, that just prior to presenting this work in the Bodecker Theater here in Boulder, we did announce that A Common Sequence did win Best Documentary at Mimesis 2023. So congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's really wonderful news.
We're very, very thrilled to have your work with us. All right. So with both of these works, I found myself kind of grappling with ideas of contingency and possession. Like those are the two words that just kept on appearing in my mind, that we are so contingent, whether it is, upon our genetics, our epigenetics, our circumstances or situations, our birth, our positionality, and then that contingency is so productive. It forms these relationships that are so beautiful and valuable to us in our personal lives and in terms of our sociality as humans, but they're also so ripe for exploitation, right? And that kind of idea of possession, whether it's of a culture or of a land or of a history, is so easily dispossessed when that contingency is exploited. And I apologize for jumping right into these kinds of thought streams, but it's difficult to think any other way because these are such rich pieces that I think have obviously deep kind of philosophical groundings. And I wonder, maybe we could even start with Chris, with your piece, because it is so much shorter but so dense in terms of what it's trying to communicate. And it really did provide like the perfect lead-in, I think, to A Common Sequence. And I wonder, Chris, how you're thinking of those ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the case of Damp Moss, I'm very interested in like the processes of capital, and I see like AI and just like these virtual spaces as just an apparatus of capital, essentially. So I mean, I think in the case of my film, I'm viewing it as kind of capital mining every little bit of marrow it can from every resource, every part of the human endeavor, to exploit, but really just to spread its resources, essentially. Yeah.
And you make very explicit references to a lot of non-human sort of elements of our existence in the world, like that we are kind of assembled with these other less more than human or not even non-living components of the world that might be exploiting us in some way, but also might be compromised.
Well, yeah, and also just kind of like trying to create a mimetic reality that acts as some kind of substitute, essentially, that tries to produce like the same kind of, like in the case of Damp Moss, like an ecstatic kind of experience, of some kind of like transcendent experience, like the presence of Wi-Fi almost like acting as like the presence of God to some extent, like it's everywhere, it's flowing through us, whatever. Yeah, I mean, so I think like in that case, like there is some kind of like mimetic reality that it's trying to create, and just kind of like imitate in every way that we possibly can. Whatever we try to do to fight it, essentially, it's just subverting it. You know, like whatever you put in front of it, it's just going to subvert. It's like it is the most powerful force in the universe. You know, whatever you put in front of it, it will just it will find its way in, essentially.
I really appreciate the use of the term mimetic at the Mimesis documentary.
Yeah, I just wanted to drop that a few times. Yeah,
very elegantly done.
Yeah.
Mike or Mary Helena, I wonder if you have a response to these ideas.
Do you want to start us off, Mary Helena?
I mean, I just, that these words that you've used to frame up the film are, words that took Mike and I like maybe 4 years to like completely hone in on. So your response is like, perfectly sort of generous and succinct and right on in the way that we were, I guess, like, initially interested in an animal that had the salamander that had such like a permeable skin and became sort of like an indicator species of environmental collapse. And then so thinking about it being a tool or being kind of used as like a measuring device, and then researching about the convent and seeing all these different kind of permutations or transformations that happen quite literally with it regenerating its limbs, but also becoming syrup, being, ingredient, being, used in all these different ways, became, kind of like the springboard of these stories of adaptation. And maybe similar to Chris, like as the film kind of continued to be, or similar to what Chris was speaking to, but like we realized as we began to follow the storylines that presented from the convent that these ideas about adaptation and connection and contingency were like most strongly kind of articulated in like the highly pervasive and adaptive power of a capitalist extractive logic. And then that really became sort of like a guiding idea for our work.
No, I think, yeah, you said it really well. I mean, possession obviously plays a huge part in where the film ends up, and this kind of like that possession or kind of guiding strategy of possession, at least in the US, has become the semi-arbitrary line between the natural and the non-natural world. And that where that line is placed is sort of contingent upon the power that is determining it. And, it has shifted throughout history. And I think we were really interested in sort of exploring how that line is shifted and where it falls in order for things that have been considered a part of the commons historically to be owned and to become possessed by a certain power.
Thank you so much. I'm conscious of the lateness of time and the lateness in the week. I'm going to open it up to our wonderful audience for further questions. Adrian.
Hi, thank you both for two amazing works, and especially the Mary Helena's and Mike's film. Something that I've been thinking about, I guess, having seen a lot of the films here over the last week, is like the question of the social. And there's this line from, I think, Cinema 2, Deleuze. I don't want to be that person who's quoting Deleuze, but it's always stuck with me. He says, like, post-war film is defined by this idea that the people are missing. And I was kind of wondering how you approach that question of, sort of like the social elements in reaction to technology and sort of like expansive geography. And yeah, that's the primary question. I mean, I think that probably applies to both the films and other films as well. So.
Do you want to start, Mike, or do you? I'm happy.
You can go ahead.
Well, I mean, like we were just talking about this idea of like this idea of like whether or not our film like decentered the human, or it were like we were like kind of like toying with this idea of like, well, we intentionally tried to structure this movie in a way where we had these like lenses in sort of sites or or ecologies that weren't like, we're not making a movie about the sociality of the nuns or something, or the lack of sociality in their cloistered life. And so it was like, we're going to look at this place like through the salamander, or they're like, we're going to look at this place like through the apple, or we're going to, or AI or whatever, like these specifically like non-human kind of like vantage points. But then like ultimately like the film is so directed and guided by these like we were really invested in having these interviews as sort of a through line throughout, and to create dimension, to have other people fleshing out the story with their human stories. So trying to strike a balance, I think, between I'm maybe like both of those emphases, and certainly to try to push against a single human story or anything overly like didactic or comprehensive, or to appear to have any sort of totalizing take on a place or an issue, but to try to use these maybe like different sideways entry points into locations and communities and cultures to like lean into the connection points between human and non-human subjects. I'm not sure if that's how I think about it, the sociality question. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's coming to mind, which is maybe not is an exact answer to the question. It's getting a little late on the East Coast. You'll have to forgive us for both. I'm gonna have my pajamas on or under right this. I'm gonna shift into bed after this. But what I'm thinking about is something that came up in conversation, is this idea of like datification. And we talked a lot about, datification and things becoming data. And we often think about that as the kind of like traces or trails that a human being, or like that we leave behind in social media, in these social spaces or things like that. But through research in the film, we came to discover that there were all of these more nuanced ways of thinking about humans becoming data, like the way that the gesture of an apple picker is, kind of studied and becomes content to be fed to an AI system to train it to, pick the soft fruits and things like that. So there were these elements of kind of like, I don't know, social media was kind of like on the outskirts or thinking about the film with this idea of datification, but it also had this sort of like such another sort of strong and nuanced foundation that we followed as we were thinking about everything in the film kind of becomes data, including humans at some point. And we were really interested in that sort of like logical line.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, go for it, Thomas.
Because it's exactly the ending of your answer, Mike, Mary Helena. Hi, thank you for being here in spite of the time. So everything becomes data, but actually by looking at your film, I started to, and seeing the liberties that you're taking with archival material, that you're using alongside material that you have produced yourselves. I'm thinking here about the interviews, about the sort of weaving of the narration. It also feels like everything becomes an archive too, in some sense, that it gets indexed, and we don't know, I guess, who this data, or who this archive is going to work for in the future, right? You don't have much control. But I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit about these liberties that you took with archival material, and how you see the original work that you did in the film and the sort of discourse building further contributing or
entering into a direct conversation with that archive that you're mining from different sources.
I'm just going to continue with this rhythm of saying a bunch of stuff, and then you can say something more clarifying, Mike. But like for me and Mike, like I feel like one of the first archival pieces that came in that was like super exciting for us was the data image sequence that you see that's kind of represented in the film. It feels like a flicker film in the middle of the apple picking scene. So that's a series of still images that were from Manoj Karki's lab that they produced to do the training for the robotic picker. And we were really excited about like that interrupting the film, images that were not made for humans, images that were made for machines, sort of interrupting the film and becoming this sort of ambiguous interiority in the film. And then that sort of set us up on this idea of artifacts of science or artifacts from like knowledge production being the sort of these images that, you know, come from all these different time periods that would interject like our films like more contained temporality. And so then we kind of worked backwards and kind of applied that mindset on how we were already working with mural images that we shot in Pátzcuaro, and then integrating natural history or like natural science illustrations that were produced in that area by scientists, and specifically the French expedition that's mentioned in the axolotl scene. So kind of trying to draw out a very loose and not at all comprehensive kind of arch of image making as it relates to science, biology, these things. And so then that we kind of see that culminate in the images that are a part of the patent documents that we see.
That was perfect. I don't have anything to add right now.
Questions? I know they're out there. Don.
I was looking at the beauty of the way it was filmed, and you had such a patient presence with the camera that used duration to bring out beauty in shots, even in the animated robots. You were consciously very steady, concentrated. It allowed me to follow the film very clearly because you didn't cut away. It was the image and rhythm of the film gave me a way to think about the film. And I wanted to ask you to speak to that.
I mean, I guess I would just first say, like, thanks so much. It's really lovely to hear that it articulated in that way, that, you know, the duration and the imagery kind of gave you a space to think in the film, because I think we were always interested in creating an essay film through in which the images were sort of like arguing in and of themselves, the juxtaposition, the pacing, and the variation of those things. So just thanks for that. I was going to say also, I'd be really interested to hear Chris talk about this too, because I got a chance to view the film online earlier, and I just found it incredibly beautiful to look at and engaging, and sort of like activated a thought process in myself as well.
I had exactly the same thought, Mike.
But I guess, I mean, the way that the film unfolds happens largely chronologically. It wasn't intended in that way, but it tended to happen that, you know, we shot the first sequence with the fisherman first, and then we went back to Mexico, and then found the location in Tacoma, which came up through the conversations with the fishermen there. And some of it is contingency, again, is happenstance. We kind of we didn't know what to expect. We were invited on the night fishing shoot on the first night we were there. And and we're kind of like chaotically kind of moving the camera around, and then we found the image that we stick with for the rest of that scene, that kind of like plays out over time and sort of opens itself up to us. And I think we just became interested in including that durational element, which engaged with a certain ethnographic tradition, but in a way that we thought we could try and complicate in terms of like the people that were talking to the interview subjects, giving their perspective on it, but also like using interjections with an edit, kind of lulling a viewer into a certain sense of safety with what to expect in terms of an image or an edit, and then breaking that, either by location, by shifting from Mexico to the US very rapidly and sort of without much kind of foreshadowing, or something like in the sequence that Mary Helena was talking about before, a kind of long durational take of labor in the field, and then directly cutting to the data sequence and the flicker. So I think we were always interested in sort of like moving back and forth between those things, and then working very intuitively over the course of a few years filming. Yeah, Mary Helena, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, just like duration as a space to like think about what you just saw, or to have, or to be in a space of unknowing, and to try to like build in those moments within a film, because we were really interested in having moments that explain what you're seeing, and to try to balance those out, especially with a film that's so focused on labor, to be able to watch expertise and art form unfold. But yeah, please, I'd love to hear Chris respond as well.
I mean, I think like in the case of my film, I was interested in kind of creating these almost schizophrenic spaces that felt to some extent like a ASMR guided meditation. That almost felt like flipping through apps or flipping through various texts, maybe like referencing like the works of Martin Luther, the King James Bible, along with like social media updates. And so my relation to the text and the images were kind of just, again, like trying to create this kind of almost like a rapid prayer, kind of shooting back and forth between shots of like commerce and the Oculus, Yellowstone, various digital spaces, and yeah, just trying to kind of expand upon the almost the spiritual element of traversing these like digital and physical realms.
Yes, Anne.
Hi there. Thank you so much for both those movies. I'm curious about how you went to Pasquaro first, how it evolved. Did you know about the actual, is that why you went? What was, how is it sort of structured in that way? You said something about it being a narrative going in, some kind of chronological order, but just how, because there's so many questions you have after, which is exciting. Actually, I want to know, when I've been to Pátzcuaro and thought about a lot of these things, but just curious how you came with the fish. So the fishing, shooting that first shoot led to your more information about the animal. I mean, is that how it sort of worked?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, just curious about the research first, the preparation, how the kinds of interviews that where the questions were coming from, and that sort of thing. I mean, it was so became so lucid but mysterious at the same time. The nun scene, just watching her, the way you shot her moving with the tanks was, incredible, like a dream. And then the faces of the animals, and just the resonances, poetic resonance, very strong.
Thank you so much. We had read about Sister Ophelia's work, and we're really interested in the I mean, the science lab, the conservation effort, this sort of syrup, the farming of an ingredient for a syrup that sustains a convent, like all of those things stacked on each other were really compelling to us. And we went there specifically to meet her and to film an interview. We got connected with a producer in the area, or I'm not even sure. I think this was her first film that she had worked on, but a filmmaker, an artist, and formerly a historian that worked in the area. And she became our producer. Her name's Graciela. And you hear her voice in the film. I mean, and so she, with her, ties to the area and her, her background as a historian, became like incredibly instrumental. So she introduced us to Don Maurizio and his family. And then their interview kind of steered us to Washington. So it was this series of conversations and connections, first with Graciela and having her join like our very small team. And then the conversations with people around the lake that directed the US locations became really important. So once we learned about the kind of the Purepecha community in Washington State, we learned about Joseph Iracheta, who runs the MBDC, the Data Sovereignty, the Indigenous Data Sovereignty Consortium in South Dakota. So it was, it was, yeah, it was like kind of like detective work based on kind of all the kind of rich conversations that we had around the lake. And I think originally Mike and I were maybe thinking about something that would be a little bit more associative, or like, I don't know, or like more like pairing a place with another, like a lake. I don't know, this was never really where the movie was going to go, but like another lake in the US that had a similar series of, interesting environmental, economical, ecosystems. But that just didn't seem, that never really felt like the right direction for the film. And it was really just pulling the threads of everything that was already established and realizing that, through all these conversations about food production or pharmaceutical production, that like we're all, we are the beneficiaries of all these things that feel kind of far from or disparate, and that by kind of this very meandering path, like we can touch on the ways of that we are connected. I think that was me turning into a pumpkin as I answered that question. But I hope I got some information out.
I was just going to add, sorry, just very quickly that, I think we read about the nuns, and I think we saw in that story a kind of like nest, or such a kind of like layered location, or situation of issues, that we were interested in exploring, like spirituality and religion, economy, conservation, ecological collapse. And I think all of those we were really interested in sort of researching more to develop the work, but we knew we weren't the people to tell the story of the nuns, in its completion. And we were way more interested in interconnections, or this idea of a kind of like ecological sense of filmmaking to bring together all of these disparate locations that had these common threads. And yeah, like Mary Helena said, once the fishermen told us that they migrated to Washington for work at one point, when we researched the area and found the WSU agricultural lab that was studying the robotic picking and the idea of the apple patent as this mechanism to kind of own a part of nature, or to allow a part of nature to become something other in order to own it. I think that was when everything sort of like fit together. We could see the kind of like the ending through the forest of what we're in.
It really clicks, and the leap is great. I mean, the leap to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is there one more? As we rapidly approach the hour.
So this was kind of, I think it was missed in the previous question, and it's, did you try the syrup? What was it like?
We did.
We did, yeah. It was very earthy, as I recall. I don't know what axolotl tastes like, so I'm not sure what I tasted. But yeah, we did try it. I mean, something that isn't in the film is that there's a whole, which we would have been interested to get into, but it just didn't fit. There's a whole market surrounding the basilica where the nuns sell the syrup of a kind of like knockoff or black market sort of achoke syrup as well. And that was the first I tried, which came out of like a Coke bottle. But I'm not certain that it actually contained any axolotls because they're lost in the wild.
But we did drink Sister Ophelia's Jarabe. And you still have it, even though we don't know if it's shelf stable. And now it's been like 4 years, so I probably wouldn't drink any more of it.
Yeah.
But good, like bitters, herby like bitters.
We've got one last question. Louisa.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Mary. Thank you for your film. Hi, Chris. Thank you for your film. I have a question. This is the second time I'm watching the film, and I keep wondering about the last shot. If it's digitally manipulated or if it's, naturally exposed. So, that's my question. Because it made me think of data and of this image is also data. It's also processed by a machine. And all these questions came into the last shot. So I'm wondering if you'd like to reveal anything about it.
Do you want to go ahead, Mariam? Or do you want me to?
Yeah. I mean, I love telling all the secrets. It's constructed, and we were really excited about. I think like this idea of a common sequence obviously it's speaking to genomic idea of sequencing, but also like this narrative structure and the through line being something very organically found through research and conversation, but also wholly constructed, and using the sun as this punctuation of this idea of like a constructed temporality or sense of everywhere or everything, or I don't know, the sun rising, the sun setting, like this constructed container of the film. So we were excited about making something that could kind of be a little meta and also sublime at the same time, particularly after this robotic Garden of Eden scene. I think like having those two images in conversation was important for us. Mike?
Yeah, no, I mean that. Yeah, I think just this idea of like arriving at the impossible image that was only possible through manipulation, through sort of datification. I love the way you described it, and I mean, we get the question about it a lot, and so I'm kind of like very humbled by the fact that it seems to sort of be functioning on both a kind of like kind of poetic and semi-spiritual level, but also very, that it contains a lot of information as well, because I think we were very unsure about it at a certain point. So just thank you for the question, and yeah.
And thanks for watching the movie twice.
Thank you.
Well, Chris, Mary Helena, Mike, thank you so much for sharing your work with us. Congratulations on these beautiful pieces. And yeah, we really hope to have you at Mimesis in person sometime soon. But thank you so much for joining us virtually, and good night. Have a great sleep.
Thank you. Thank you. This was a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was
everybody.
great.
Please. And thank you, Mimesis.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, guys.
Good
You too.
night.
Bye.